Hello guys, welcome to Folktales, where interesting stories are told. If you're new here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and of course, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Your voice matters here. Eva Morgan had always been the kind of woman who paid attention to the little things, labels on gifts, how people stirred their tea, whether someone's voice cracked during a smile. She believed homes were made in the small things, a folded blanket, an extra spoon, a note on the mirror. But nothing in her quiet, intentional life prepared her for how easily all of it could fall apart over something so painfully small. It was a Tuesday morning. She remembered because the scent of banana muffins was still wafting through the kitchen, and her husband, Daniel, had just kissed her forehead before heading into the shower. They were preparing to host his parents for dinner that night, so Eva had pulled out the family silverware and the expensive crystal wine glasses, something Daniel's mother adored. That's when she found it, a cracked frame. The photo had fallen off the shelf in the guest room, probably from the shaky vacuum cleaner the housekeeper used the day before. Eva picked it up gently, planning to fix it later. But by the time Daniel returned from work that evening, the crack had already become her death sentence. "You broke my mother's wedding frame." Daniel's voice was sharper than she'd ever heard it. He didn't even wait for an explanation. She blinked, confused. "No, I found it that way. He scoffed, holding the frame up like evidence in court. "It was on the shelf this morning, perfectly fine. This was a gift from my late grandmother." "You're always so careless. I didn't break it," she said, softly, but he'd already made up his mind. It wasn't just about the frame. It never really is. That night, Daniel's tone was cold, his words clinical. "You don't belong in this house anymore. Pack your things." He said it like he was dismissing an intern. Eva felt her heart crawl into her throat. "You're kicking me out." "Over a picture frame?" "No," he replied. "I'm kicking you out because I'm tired of excuses, tired of babysitting. You never belonged to this family." That last sentence clung to her ribs like a stab. His parents didn't even flinch when she walked past them carrying a duffel bag. His mother just shook her head with thinly veiled judgment. "Maybe next time. She'd be more careful," she muttered. His father, Harold, only sipped his wine, indifferent. Eva didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. She walked out of the front door with her heart in pieces, one suitcase, and no plan. Outside, the night air was sharp. She had never imagined herself homeless, not even for a night. She called 3 friends, only one picked up. "I'd let you stay, Eva, but my cousin's here from Lagos, no space, I'm sorry." She found a budget motel off Riverdale Avenue. Dingy curtains, a TV that barely worked, and a flickering bathroom light. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. And then she cried. Her phone buzzed, a message from her father's lawyer. "Miss Eva, please call me when you can. It's urgent. Your father passed away in his sleep this morning." The sob that escaped her chest wasn't even human. Her father, her anchor, her quiet protector was gone. She had nothing left. Not a home, not a husband. Not even the father who had whispered into her hair as a child, "You are stronger than you know." The next day, she sat at a small cafe with trembling fingers and ordered only tea, because that's all she could afford. She called the lawyer back. He was kind, gentle, and formal. "Mr. Harris passed peacefully, but there's a matter of his will. He left something significant in your name. We'll need you to attend the reading on Friday." She almost laughed. What could he possibly have left? Her father was a retired music teacher who lived simply and rarely traveled. Still, she agreed. What else could she do? That week was the longest of her life. She worked odd hours at a laundromat just to afford meals. She slept with one eye open and whispered to herself every night, "Just breathe, Eva, one more day." No one from Daniel's side reached out. Not a single message, not even a cold apology. And somehow, that hurt more than the eviction, Friday came with a storm. Rain poured down as she made her way to Carter and Folklore Associates. The office smelled of old leather and ink. She was ushered into a room where a few unfamiliar faces sat. Her father's old neighbor, a friend from church. And shockingly, Daniel. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. His eyes darted when he saw her, like he hadn't expected her to show up. "Why are you here?" she asked, unable to stop herself. He cleared his throat. I was invited." Before she could process that, Mr. Cole, the lawyer, walked in. "Thank you for coming. We'll begin." He read the will slowly. There were small donations to charities, a painting left to the choir director, and then to my beloved daughter, Eva Morgan. I leave my estate, the country home in Devonshire, and all financial assets under the Harrison Legacy Fund. The room fell silent. Daniel choked on his own breath. What fund?" Eva turned, her mouth slightly parted. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Harrison established a legacy fund 32 years ago from inherited oil shares. The value currently sits at approximately £8.4 million. Eva blinked. She couldn't speak. Daniel stood. "There must be a mistake. She didn't even live with him. I was his son-in-law for 5 years. And you threw his daughter out over a picture frame." The lawyer replied calmly. The silence in the room was suffocating. Daniel's face turned from shock to shame, then quickly to entitlement. She wouldn't even know what to do with that kind of money. Eva finally found her voice. "Maybe, but I know what not to do with it, like destroying someone over something that can be fixed with glue." That was the moment it all began to shift. The girl they called Fragile was no longer afraid to stand. She didn't need Daniel's approval. She didn't need his family's validation. Her father had seen her, cherished her, and trusted her. And now, she had the power to decide what came next. Eva didn't leave the lawyer's office feeling triumphant. There was no giddy music playing in her head, no montage of revenge playing out behind her eyes. She left quietly, with rain-soaked shoes and an aching heart, the kind of ache that comes not from loss alone, but from having to act strong when you still feel shattered inside. She walked down the long steps, outside Carter and Cole, opened her umbrella, and stood still for a moment under the drizzle. The city moved around her, cars whooshing past, people talking into phones, mothers tugging at their children's wrists. It all felt distant. She was technically a millionaire now, but emotionally, she was just a bruised woman in yesterday's coat, fighting not to cry on a busy street. At the motel, she sat in silence for an hour, just staring at the wall. Then, she did something unexpected. She opened her journal, the one she hadn't touched in months, and began to write. "He didn't even look at me like I was human. Just a mistake wearing shoes." She paused, wiped a tear, and kept writing. "But Daddy knew. Somehow, he knew this day would come, and he gave me something bigger than money. He gave me proof that I mattered to someone." The next morning, she checked out of the motel and took a cab to Devonshire. The family estate was a peaceful, ivy-covered property surrounded by lavender bushes and a white iron gate. She had visited it only twice as a child, during summers when her father would retreat there to compose music. He always called it his sacred place, where he could think without the world whispering too loud. Unlocking the front door was like stepping into memory. The faint scent of cedar and lemon oil lingered in the air. There was dust on the bookshelves, and the piano in the living room had a blanket draped over it, as though it had been grieving. She stood in the center of the room and whispered, "I'm home, Dad." She didn't unpack, not yet. She spent the first few days walking around barefoot, opening cabinets, lighting old candles, playing the keys on the piano one by one. Slowly, the silence began to feel less heavy. She cooked simple meals, drank tea on the porch swing, and tried to forgive the version of herself that had once begged Daniel to believe her. Still, peace was not a straight road. One evening, Eva received a voicemail from Daniel. She hesitated before pressing play. "Eva, I don't know what to say. I was wrong. I overreacted. I let my pride and my parents' opinions blind me. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please. Let's talk." She deleted the message without flinching. Week passed before the media found out. The story was too juicy to resist. Wife kicked out over broken frame, inherits multi-million estate days later. Her face was suddenly on blogs, TV panels, even breakfast show discussions. Some called her the luckiest woman in the country. Others labeled her a quiet feminist icon, but allowed few choose cruelty, gold digger, manipulative. But she broke the frame on purpose. Eva stayed off social media and refused all interview requests. But pain has a way of leaking in, even through silence. One tabloid ran an anonymous quote from a family friend accusing her of turning her father against her husband. Another suggested she'd had an affair before being kicked out. None of it was true, but the truth rarely screams as loud as a lie. She sat in her father's study one night, scrolling through the vitriol, and felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. That same feeling she had the night Daniel turned his back on her. But she wasn't that same woman anymore. She opened the bottom drawer of her father's desk, and there it was, a thick envelope labeled, "For Eva, in case I leave too soon." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest daughter, I know how the world sees you as quiet, soft, easy to dismiss, but I also know what the world doesn't see, your strength. Your gentleness is not weakness, and your silence is not surrender. I leave you this home just because I love you, but because I trust you to rise when others try to bury you. Whatever comes next, remember who you are." "I always did, Dad." She read it 3 times, and then she wept, 4 hours, letting all the pent-up heartbreak drain from her system. The next day, she called a local counselor and booked her first therapy appointment in years. She also began the process of settling the estate legally, signing necessary papers and moving funds into her control. The trust her father left was well structured and protected, but money was not what she needed most. She wanted clarity. She wanted growth. She wanted purpose. And so she enrolled back into law school, picking up the final year she had paused when Daniel insisted she focus on building a family first. This time, she paid the tuition herself quietly, privately. She started attending lectures again, sitting at the back with a notebook and a mind on fire. Her classmates barely recognized her, but her professors did. "Ms. Morgan," Professor Lang said after class one day, "I always knew you had it in you." "Welcome back," she smiled, not a wide one, but the kind that reaches deep and says, "I'm here now. I'm not running anymore." Weeks later, she received a handwritten letter. "No, return address. I never deserved you. I hope you're doing well. I hope one day you'll find someone who doesn't need you to be perfect to love you. D." Eva didn't respond. She folded the note and placed it in a shoebox marked past lessons. She began to volunteer at a local shelter that supported women who had been emotionally or financially abused. Hearing their stories made her feel less alone. It also helped her realize something important. Her story wasn't unique, and that was heartbreaking and powerful all at once. She decided to start something bigger. She called it the Claire Foundation, named after her father's late mother. Its goal: to provide emergency housing and legal aid to women kicked out of homes over small mistakes. She hosted her first fundraiser at the Devonshire estate. Invitations were sent, speeches prepared, but one name surprised her when she saw it. RSVP Harold, Daniel's father. He arrived late, grey hair slicked, wearing a sheepish expression. "I didn't come to ask forgiveness," he said, "just to say, your father was a wise man. And I was wrong about you." Eva nodded. "Thank you. That means something." As guests mingled in the garden, Eva stood at the edge of the balcony overlooking the sea. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You were right, Dad. I'm stronger than they knew." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The day Eva's story aired on national television, she didn't even know She was in the middle of arranging a community outreach event through the Clare Foundation when her phone began buzzing non-stop. Calls, messages, mentions. Her name had gone viral again, but this time, the headlines weren't just scandal. They were split. Some showed admiration. Others were still laced with envy. Wife kicked out over tiny mistake now runs multi-million foundation. One headline read, "From housewife to powerhouse, the unexpected journey of Eva Morgan," said another. But one headline caught her attention, and not in a good way. Ex-husband challenges inheritance, claims mental instability in father's will. Her stomach turned. It was Daniel again clawing back into her life with twisted logic and a broken sense of entitlement. According to the article, he was filing for a review of the will, arguing that her father, Mr. Harrison, had been under emotional distress and not of sound mind when he made Eva the sole heir. Eva didn't cry. She didn't panic, but she sat down slowly, her eyes fixed on the digital newsprint. After everything, after kicking her out, smearing her name, going silent for weeks, was this his next move? She closed her laptop, walked to the garden, and knelt beside the lavender bush her father had planted. She whispered, "They just don't stop, do they?" And for a moment, it felt like the wind nodded in sympathy. Later that evening, she called her father's old lawyer, Mr. Cole Daniels. "Contesting the will, I saw," he said, calm as ever. "We're prepared for this. Your father's paperwork was ironclad. We even have medical certification of his mental capacity from just 6 weeks before he passed. But we may need testimony, and something more personal to anchor public perception." "Like what?" Eva asked. "A story, Eva, your truth, the one no one has heard yet." Eva exhaled. She hated the spotlight. But maybe it was time. She called Leo Simmons, a former classmate turned journalist who now worked with the Daily Ledger. They had barely spoken since university, but she remembered he once told her, "You ever want your story told with truth and fire, you call me." She dialed his number. He picked on the second ring. "Eva Morgan," he said, surprised. "I need my story told, and I need the world to hear it from me, before the courtrooms turn it into entertainment." There was a pause. "Send me a time and place," Leo replied, "and I'll be there with a recorder and a clean slate." They met at the Devonshire estate, sitting by the piano with a cup of hibiscus tea between them. Eva spoke 4 hours. She told him about the night Daniel kicked her out, about sleeping in a motel with no money, about finding her father's letter, about the will, about the Clare Foundation. Every detail, every tremor in her voice. Leo recorded it all, eyes focused, silent except for the occasional nod. The article dropped 3 days later, and it was thunderous, thrown out, but never broken. Eva Morgan's truth. It wasn't flashy. It was raw, real, and beautifully written. It included photos of her father's letter, the Devonshire estate, even a line from her journal. "You don't need to raise your voice to prove you were hurt." The public shifted. People who once labeled her a manipulative wife now apologized. In her comments, women from across the country sent messages, some sharing stories of being kicked out over small misunderstandings. Some had children, some were still homeless. And one message, in particular, broke Eva's heart. "I stayed when I should have left. You left when you had no choice. I wish I had your strength." Meanwhile, Daniel was doubling down. He released a video, attempting to look remorseful. "I only wanted what was fair," he said. "I never meant to hurt Eva. But a mistake like that breaking my grandmother's heirloom felt deliberate." Eva watched it once, then deleted it. She wasn't going to argue anymore. In court, Daniel appeared with a team of attorneys. Eva walked in alone, but with the strength of truth in her chest and a folder in her hand. Mr. Cole began the proceedings. The will, Your Honor, was executed in full legal standing, with both psychiatric and medical evaluation proving Mr. Harrison was of sound mind. Daniel's lawyer fired back, suggesting that Eva manipulated her father emotionally. That's when Eva stood. "I have my father's personal journal entries," she said. Pages he wrote over the last 5 years. About me. About Daniel. About the mistakes he regretted. "I'm not here to fight for money. I'm here because my father left me something sacred, and I won't let anyone twist that." The judge allowed the entries. One read, "Daniel treats my daughter like she's a guest in her own life. If I leave this world and she's still with him, I'll have failed her." Daniel's face turned ghost white. Another entry followed. "Today Eva visited. She brought tea. We talked about dreams. I saw a light in her I hadn't seen in months. I knew then I had to protect her future, even if I wouldn't be there to see it." The courtroom was silent. Daniel looked down at his lap, avoiding every pair of eyes. Then came the final blow. Mr. Cole presented video footage, home security camera recordings that Eva's father had kept, showing Daniel storming out of the Devonshire home months earlier, yelling at Mr. Harrison, "You don't get to tell me how to treat my wife." The judge looked at Daniel, then at Eva. "This court finds no grounds to contest the will." Case closed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Leo was among them, but he didn't ask questions. He simply gave her a respectful nod. Eva walked past the microphones, the flashing cameras, and the questions hurled like stones. Her heart wasn't racing. Her hands didn't shake. She had fought her battle, and her father's voice still lived inside her. That evening, she visited her father's grave. She placed a bouquet of fresh white roses and a handwritten note tucked beneath a smooth stone. "We did it, Dad." Your voice was heard. She stood in silence for a while, the sky darkening above, stars peeking out like old friends, and for once, she didn't feel broken. She felt whole. A week later, a parcel arrived. Inside was a letter from Daniel, not through lawyers, but handwritten. "I lost more than a marriage. I lost my soul chasing validation from my parents. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you ever think of me, I hope it's not just with hate." Eva folded the letter, placed it in the past lessons box, and smiled softly, not with bitterness, not with glee. Just closure. She sat on her porch swing, journal in hand, and wrote. "Some mistakes cost too much. Some people confuse silence with defeat. But I learned that you can be kicked out of a house and still come home to yourself." The morning after the final ruling, Eva sat at her kitchen table with a slice of toast she didn't finish and a full mug of tea that went cold. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, with law firms offering to represent her for new opportunities, advocacy, groups asking for partnerships, even a TV network floating the idea of a documentary. But she didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like a survivor trying to breathe. Her story had become larger than her. And that was terrifying. So, she turned off her phone and took a drive. No GPS, just winding roads and quiet music. She needed space from the noise, from being the woman who inherited millions after being kicked out, from being anyone at all. But life had its own ideas. By the time she returned to Devonshire, she found a letter taped to her front door. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper, handwritten in clean, blocky letters. "You think you've won, but all your money can't change the past. You humiliated this family, and some debts don't go unpaid." There was no signature. Eva's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Her first instinct was fear, but then a strange calm settled over her. She folded the paper neatly, walked inside, and placed it under a glass dish on the counter. No panic, just quiet rage. She'd lived through worse. She wasn't the scared girl Daniel kicked out anymore. Still, she reported it to the police and installed a new security system. Her foundation, Clare House, was gaining traction. She had helped 6 women transition into new housing. One of them, a woman named Martha, had been kicked out by her husband after ruining a dinner party. Her story hit her close. Eva sat with Martha over tea one day and said gently, "It's okay to still love them, even after they hurt you. But it's not okay to go back." Martha wiped a tear. You're the first person who didn't make me feel stupid. Eva squeezed her hand. You're not. You're human. And you've got this. The two bonded. And it gave Eva a new sense of mission. Helping women like Martha wasn't just charity. It was healing. For them. For herself. Meanwhile, Leo's article had sparked a wave of public discussion around emotional abuse and financial manipulation in marriages. Podcasts, panels, and even book clubs began dissecting Eva's story as a case study in modern betrayal and strength. She was invited to speak on national television. She almost declined, but then she thought of her father. Whatever comes next, remember who you are, so she accepted. On the day of the interview, she wore a simple navy blue dress, and her father's old cufflink chain on her wrist, repurposed as a bracelet. The host asked the question millions had wondered. If Daniel hadn't kicked you out, would any of this have happened? Eva smiled gently. Probably not. But that's the irony of life. Sometimes, being thrown out is what opens the door to something greater. He meant to destroy me. But I found myself instead. The audience clapped, but it was the tears in the eyes of the host that meant the most. After the segment aired, a flood of women emailed her foundation, some begging for help, others offering to volunteer, and a few simply saying, "Thank you for showing us we're not alone." But Daniel wasn't done. A tabloid published a new article. Daniel tells his side. "I was the victim too, inside." He claimed Eva had manipulated her father against him, painted him as cold, and exaggerated the story of her eviction. Eva laughed for the first time in weeks, not because it was funny, but because it was pitiful. She called Leo. "Let's do a follow-up. But this time, I want people to see the receipts." And she meant it literally. She and her legal team prepared a full timeline of texts, emails, photos, voice messages, even Daniel's voicemail from the night he kicked her out. They shared it with the Daily Ledger under the headline, "Silence. Broken. The truth they didn't want you to hear." The article demolished any credibility Daniel had left, especially when it included his quote from the home video yelling, "You never belonged in my family anyway." Public sentiment turned fully in Eva's favor. Sponsors pulled out of Daniel's new construction company. Clients cancelled deals. His apology video was ratioed into oblivion. Still, Eva didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She sent him one final message. "I forgive you, but not for your sake mine. I deserve to be free of the weight you dropped on me." And then she blocked his number permanently. With peace slowly returning, Eva hosted a memorial celebration for her father. Not a funeral he'd already been laid to rest, but a true celebration. Former students, neighbors, fellow teachers, and old musicians came together to play music, share stories, and remember the quiet man who had changed lives in silence. At the end, Eva stood before the crowd and spoke. "My father once told me that love is quiet work. That it isn't loud or boastful, it's steady. The way he loved me was proof. And I will carry that love with me, always." Tears flowed freely, laughter too. Someone told a story about her father singing to birds when no one was watching. Another remembered how he paid for their school fees, anonymously. Eva felt proud, not just of who he was, but of who she was becoming. That evening, as she walked back to the house alone, she saw someone standing by the lavender bush. It was Michael, Daniel's younger brother. She froze. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he said, hands raised. Eva stared, unsure. "But I came to say thank you," he added, "for showing me the truth. About you, about Daniel, about our family." She sighed. "It took you long enough." "I know," he nodded. "And I'm sorry." They stood in silence. "Are you here to defend him?" she asked quietly. "No," Michael said. "I'm here because I didn't stop him. And I should have. You didn't deserve what happened. And I didn't speak up when I should have." Eva looked at him carefully. "Thank you for that." He handed her a small box. "This was your father's. Found it in our attic. I figured you should have it. Inside was a first edition of Wuthering Heights, her father's favorite. On the first page, he had scribbled, "To Eva, my heart's soft armor." The words struck her like a breeze through a closed window, unexpected and refreshing. She held the book close and nodded, her throat tight. "You're welcome at the Foundation, if you ever want to volunteer," she whispered before walking away. Michael blinked. "I'd be honored." In the weeks that followed, Eva found a rhythm. Morning tea, admin at Clare House, lunch meetings, quiet evenings by the piano. The nightmares stopped, the sadness lessened. Joy crept back in slowly, but surely. She began preparing her father's journals for publication, not for profit, but for healing. 4 daughters who needed to know they mattered. The first copy of My Daughter, My Song, Reflections of a Father's Heart arrived on a rainy morning in October. Eva stood at the front door of Devonshire, the package trembling slightly in her hands, not from cold, but from quiet disbelief that something so sacred had finally found paper. She sliced the tape open carefully. Inside was the journal-turned book her father had written over the span of 15 years, now bound in a soft matte cover. On it, an old photograph of him holding Eva as a toddler on a park bench, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. The dedication on the first page read, "For the little girl who never asked to be strong, but became a pillar anyway, let these words be your warmth when the world turns cold." Eva hugged the book to her chest. There were no tears this time. Just peace. The launch of the book was intentionally intimate. Just a warm evening gathering at Clare House with music, candles, and conversations that mattered. Survivors of abandonment, women who had lost everything over small mistakes, young girls looking for hope, they all came. Eva stood in front of them, calm and confident in her dark green dress, and read from one of the final pages. She walked into the fire thinking she'd be burned. Instead, she lit everything around her. The applause was gentle, but the impact thundered quietly through every chest in the room. Martha, now a housing mentor at Clare House, leaned over and whispered, "You have no idea what you've started." But Eva did. And she was ready. The foundation had grown beyond anything she imagined. Donations poured in. Legal partnerships were formed. Shelters were secured in 4 other cities. And Eva had even been invited to speak at the National Women in Justice Conference the following spring. Yet, she remained grounded. No personal assistance, no celebrity chase. Just impact, rooted in story. One afternoon, while organizing case files, Eva received a handwritten letter from an anonymous supporter. It simply read, "Because of you, I stayed alive. Because of you, I walked out. Because of you, I finally believe I'm enough." She stared at it for a long time before sliding it into her journal with a smile. That one note reminded her that healing wasn't loud. It was layered. Like petals slowly blooming. She began hosting bi-weekly workshops at Clare House. They weren't just for legal help. They were for rebuilding. One session focused on laughter, another on budgeting, another on grief. They brought in therapists, life coaches, even chefs who taught comfort cooking. It wasn't about charity, it was about community. At one such session, Eva told the women, "Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the story someone else tried to write for you." And every woman in the room sat up straighter. Daniel never returned. No more letters, no messages. The world had shifted, and he had been left in the echo of a life he tried to control. Eva didn't wonder about him anymore. She didn't need to. Her story no longer hinged on his cruelty. On the first anniversary of her father's passing, Eva travelled back to their old neighbourhood. The flat where he taught music was now a community arts centre. She walked its halls slowly, touching the walls, smelling the faint aroma of chalk and coffee. In the back room, a framed photo of her father hung beside a piano. A quote beneath it read, "Music doesn't always need to be heard. Sometimes, it just needs to be felt." She knelt before the photo and whispered, "You didn't just save me, Dad. You built me." Then she placed another white rose at the foot of the frame. One for each day she kept going when it felt impossible. A few days later, she was asked to sit on the advisory board for a new government program protecting women from wrongful eviction and emotional abuse. It was a full circle moment. She'd once been thrown out with nothing but a cracked voice and a duffel bag. Now, she was shaping policy. During her first board meeting, an older woman with a stern bun and glasses leaned across the table and said, "Ms. Morgan, your story. It changed the way I see my daughter. Thank you for making me softer." Eva smiled. "We're all learning." That night, back at the estate, she curled up with a mug of chai and her journal. The wind tapped lightly against the windows, and the fireplace crackled nearby. She wrote, "This house was once just bricks and wood. Now it's a shelter for the broken, a sanctuary for healing, a home built on truth." She also wrote a letter to her future self. "Dear Eva, you didn't break. You rose. You stood in court with trembling hands and walked out stronger than the oak trees lining this estate. If the world forgets, let this page remember, you are not a victim. You are the author now." She sealed the letter and slipped it into her desk drawer. Months passed, then a year, and then two, and Eva kept growing not as a heroine or icon, but as a woman who simply chose not to die in the room she was thrown out of. She still cried sometimes, still missed her father deeply, still got nervous before interviews, still doubted her strength on bad days, but now she talked herself through those storms like a friend, like someone who had finally learned to love herself the way he always had. On the day the 100th woman successfully transitioned out of Clare House, Eva stood beneath a banner that read, "Your story doesn't end here." The women gathered beneath it smiling, singing, and dancing to old R&B songs blasting through a borrowed speaker. She joined in, laugh, dance, and for the first time, she felt the past dissolve, not disappear, but transform into something she could carry forward without pain. When asked what she planned next, she said, "I want to build a scholarship fund for daughters whose voices were stolen, for girls who've been told they're too much or not enough. I want to make sure they know they belong in every room they walk into." And then she smiled, the same quiet, knowing smile her father used to wear. Moral lesson: sometimes the world breaks us in the smallest of ways over things as simple as a cracked frame, a misunderstood word, or a forgotten promise. But strength isn't born in loud declarations. It grows quietly, in every choice to keep going. Eva's story reminds us that we are not defined by how others treat us, but by how we rise after being treated unfairly. If you've ever felt discarded or overlooked, remember this: your worth isn't up for debate. You are more than what they left behind. You've got this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Folktales, share with someone who needs it, drop your thoughts or key lessons in the comments section below. Your voice matters here.